The desert wind cuts across the tarmac at a remote Iranian airbase, floodlights, jet engines, missiles being loaded under darkness. A young mechanic, 22 years old, tightens the last bolt beneath the wing of a fighter jet. His hands are shaking. The metal is still warm from the last sortie. Across the runway, trucks are unloading crates marked with military codes, not Iranian codes, Russian markings, Chinese electronics, 3 countries, 1 battlefield. Because tonight the war in the Middle East may have crossed a line that military planners in Washington have feared for years. Not just Iran versus Israel, not just proxy militias and missile exchanges, something bigger, much bigger. This morning, new intelligence reports began circulating inside Western defense circles. Reports that both Russia and China are now openly backing Iran, politically, economically, and potentially militarily, as tensions explode across the region, not quietly, not indirectly, openly. If that sounds familiar, it should, because this is exactly how regional wars spiral into global confrontations. Alliances harden, red lines blur, and suddenly the conflict is no longer local. The war you thought you understood just changed. Because when 2 nuclear powers step behind one side of a Middle Eastern war, the strategic equation does not shift slightly, it detonates. This is day 1, and I am going to tell you exactly what has changed, what is coming, and why the next 48 hours may be the most important of this entire war. The military situation tonight is expanding in multiple directions at once. Missiles, warships, drones, all moving simultaneously across one of the most volatile regions on Earth. Within the last 72 hours, Iranian forces and their regional proxy network have dramatically increased operational tempo. According to Reuters, Iran-backed militias launched more than 60 drone and rocket attacks against U.S. and Israeli-linked targets across Iraq, Syria, and the Red Sea. 60 attacks, not 6, not 16, 60. And that is only the confirmed number. At the same time, the Israeli Defense Forces have expanded strike operations deep into Iranian military infrastructure tied to missile production and drone manufacturing. Israeli aircraft have reportedly hit over 40 strategic sites linked to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, missile factories, drone assembly lines, command centers. But the most important development is happening at sea. Because the Persian Gulf is now filling with warships, the U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet, operating out of Bahrain, has surged additional destroyers and missile defense systems into the region. According to CNN, at least 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers are now positioned to intercept ballistic missiles that could target U.S. bases or Allied infrastructure. 3 destroyers, each capable of launching dozens of interceptor missiles, each carrying radar systems designed to track threats hundreds of miles away. But Iran is not standing still. Iranian state media confirm that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has deployed fast attack boats and anti-ship missile batteries along the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway that carries roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. 20%. Let that sit for a moment, because closing that choke point, even temporarily, would not just be a military escalation. It would trigger a global economic shock. Meanwhile, in the Red Sea, tensions are also rising. The U.S. Central Command confirmed multiple interceptions of drones launched toward commercial shipping lanes. Several were believed to be operated by Iranian-aligned forces. The targets were not random. They were energy tankers, oil tankers, LNG carriers. But here is where the military picture becomes even more complicated, because Iran is not fighting alone. Across the region, Tehran's proxy network remains fully operational. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, armed groups in Syria, forces in Yemen, 4 fronts, all active, each capable of launching rockets, drones, and precision missiles at Israeli or Western targets. On paper, Israel and the United States still possess overwhelming military superiority, their air power, their missile defense systems, their intelligence networks. But wars are not fought on paper. They are fought across multiple fronts at once under constant pressure. And tonight, intelligence analysts are watching one specific signal that could transform this conflict from a regional war into something far larger. Russian military cargo flights into Iran have increased sharply over the last several weeks. Satellite tracking shows transport aircraft landing at Iranian airfields that support missile programs, cargo, equipment, technology. No one in Washington is saying publicly what might be inside those shipments. But privately, defense officials are asking one question: is Russia beginning to supply Iran for a larger confrontation? Because if that answer is yes, the next stage of this war could arrive much faster than anyone expected. And that leads directly to the most dangerous development now emerging behind the scenes, a development involving Russia, China, and Iran that could redraw the entire geopolitical map of this conflict. Now I need to explain the most dangerous new development in this war, the one that changes everything about what we are actually facing, because the story is no longer just about Iranian missiles or Israeli airstrikes. It is about something far larger, a new geopolitical alignment that Western intelligence agencies say is rapidly forming behind the scenes. Iran, Russia, China, three powers, one strategic axis. According to Reuters, The Washington Post, and intelligence officials speaking to NBC News, Moscow and Beijing have dramatically escalated diplomatic and strategic support for Tehran as tensions with Israel and the United States intensify. Diplomatic backing, economic protection, strategic coordination, confirmed by Reuters, confirmed by The Washington Post, confirmed by senior U.S. intelligence officials who spoke to NBC News. But the most shocking part is not the diplomacy. It is the military signaling. Because just hours after Israel expanded strikes against Iranian-linked targets, Russia publicly warned that attacks on Iranian territory could destabilize the entire region and provoke unpredictable consequences. Read that again. Russia, a nuclear power currently fighting a major war in Europe, is now publicly warning against attacks on Iran, while simultaneously deepening military cooperation with Tehran. Let that sit for a moment, because there is a profound irony here. Iran has been supplying Russia with thousands of drones used in the war in Ukraine. Those drones have been striking Ukrainian cities for months. Now Russia appears ready to repay that support, not necessarily with troops on the ground, but with strategic cover, and China is moving in parallel. Beijing has positioned itself as Iran's largest economic lifeline. According to Goldman Sachs energy analysts, China purchases a significant portion of Iranian oil exports despite international sanctions. Oil flows east, money flows back, and that economic relationship gives Tehran a financial shield that makes Western pressure far less effective. But there is another layer, a military layer, because over the past year, Russia and Iran have deepened cooperation in missile technology, drone systems, and air defense capabilities. Intelligence analysts believe Iranian engineers have been working alongside Russian specialists to refine long-range drone strike technology that could be used far beyond Ukraine, technology that could reach Israeli infrastructure. And while China is not sending weapons into the conflict directly, Beijing's diplomatic messaging has been crystal clear. Chinese officials have repeatedly called for an immediate ceasefire, while simultaneously criticizing U.S. military deployments in the region. That message is aimed at three audiences simultaneously. First, Washington, a warning that expanding military pressure on Iran risks broader confrontation. Second, the Global South, China positioning itself as the voice of restraint while the United States appears to escalate. Third, Iran itself, a signal that Tehran will not stand completely alone if tensions spiral further. But here is the brutal strategic reality. Neither Russia nor China needs to send soldiers into this war to change the balance. All they need to do is provide Iran with political cover, economic lifelines, and the technological tools to keep fighting indefinitely. And that creates a terrifying possibility, a prolonged conflict where Israel and the United States face not just Iran, but a global support network behind it, a war where the battlefield is regional, but the power struggle behind it is global. That is the bombshell now unfolding inside intelligence briefings across Washington and European capitals. The war in the Middle East may now be connected to the broader geopolitical rivalry between the United States, Russia, and China. And once those three powers begin operating on opposite sides of the same crisis, history shows how dangerous the next steps can become, because global conflicts rarely begin with formal declarations. They begin with alliances quietly hardening behind the scenes. And tonight those alliances are becoming visible. The political battle around this war is now unfolding just as intensely as the military one. Statements, votes, diplomatic warnings, all happening simultaneously. In Washington, the White House is trying to project calm. Publicly, U.S. leaders say the goal is deterrence, not escalation. The message is simple: prevent Iran from widening the war while protecting American forces and Israeli security. But inside the Pentagon, planning looks very different. Publicly, the message is restraint. Privately, the planning is expansion. According to CNN and the New York Times, U.S. defense planners have prepared contingency options that range from limited retaliatory strikes against Iranian proxy groups to direct attacks on Iranian missile infrastructure if American troops are killed. Trump told the public the United States does not want another Middle East war. The Pentagon is preparing for one. Let that sit for a moment. Because Congress is now deeply divided over how far the United States should go. Several senators from both parties have warned against direct war with Iran, arguing that the country still has thousands of ballistic missiles and a massive regional proxy network capable of striking U.S. bases across the Middle East. Others are pushing in the opposite direction. Hawkish lawmakers argue that failing to confront Iran now would only embolden Tehran and its allies. Two camps, two completely different visions of what comes next. Neither side agrees on the cost. Meanwhile, the international response is fracturing just as quickly. European governments, including France and Germany, have issued urgent calls for immediate de-escalation and diplomatic talks. The BBC reports that European Union officials are attempting to reopen quiet communication channels with Tehran. But there is a problem. Those diplomatic channels are already under enormous strain. Because Israel's position is uncompromising, Israeli defense officials have repeatedly stated that Iran's missile and drone network represents an existential threat, and they have made clear that military action will continue if that infrastructure is not dismantled. And then there is the United Nations. The UN Security Council held emergency discussions as tensions escalated. Russia and China pushed for language condemning Israeli strikes. Western powers rejected it. Deadlock, total deadlock, 3 permanent members on one side, 2 on the other, exactly the kind of diplomatic paralysis that has defined global crises since World War II. But the most important political dynamic may not be happening in New York or Washington. It is happening inside the countries directly involved in the conflict. In Iran, hardline factions are demanding retaliation against Israel and the United States. Iranian state media has been broadcasting images of missile launches and military drills designed to show strength to a domestic audience. At the same time, Israeli leaders face intense pressure from their own public to neutralize Iranian threats before they grow even larger. 2 governments, 2 publics, both demanding strength. And when leaders are pushed by domestic pressure during a crisis, compromise becomes almost impossible. There is no pause button. There is no diplomatic back channel that can stop what is already in motion. The battlefield is not just in the skies above the Middle East, it is also inside global markets. Oil first, everything else second, because whenever tensions explode around Iran, one narrow waterway instantly becomes the center of the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, but it carries nearly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. 20%, not 2, not 10, 20%. And the moment Iran began deploying missile batteries and fast attack boats near that corridor, energy traders reacted instantly. According to Reuters and Goldman Sachs commodity analysts, global oil prices surged past $94 per barrel, rising nearly 11% in just a few trading sessions as markets began pricing in the risk of disruption. 11% in days. Let that sit for a moment, because every single dollar increase in crude oil eventually travels through the entire global system, refineries, shipping companies, gas stations, and then it arrives at the pump. The American Automobile Association, cited by CBS News, says that if oil remains near $95 per barrel, average gasoline prices in the United States could quickly push back toward $4 per gallon in major cities. That hit comes straight out of the wallet of every person filling up at the pump. But gasoline is only the beginning. The shipping industry is now facing an entirely different crisis: insurance. According to Lloyd's of London, one of the world's largest maritime insurance markets, War risk premiums for vessels entering the Persian Gulf and Red Sea have already begun climbing sharply. In some cases, insurers are demanding 3 to 4 times normal coverage costs for tankers traveling through high-risk waters. 3 times, 4 times. That cost does not stay with the insurance companies. It moves directly into the price of oil, natural gas, food shipments, and manufactured goods moving across the planet. But the most extraordinary development may be happening behind closed doors inside major energy companies. According to Bloomberg energy analysts, several Gulf oil producers have quietly begun contingency planning for partial export disruptions if missile strikes or naval clashes occur near key terminals. Even the possibility of that scenario is enough to terrify markets, because if shipping through the Strait of Hormuz were interrupted for even a few days, the global oil system would experience something it has not seen in decades: a sudden supply shock, not theoretical, real, tankers waiting offshore, refineries running dry, energy prices exploding across continents. And if this war continues expanding, especially with Russia and China now openly backing Iran diplomatically, the global energy system could face pressure from multiple directions at the same time. That is the economic front of this war, invisible to most people, until the moment they pull into a gas station and see the number on the pump. And by then, the shock has already arrived. The explosions come first, then the silence, then the sirens. In a narrow street on the edge of Gaza City, dust still hangs in the air after a missile strike hit a residential block late at night. Windows shattered, concrete collapsed inward. Families ran into the street barefoot in the dark, neighbors digging with their hands, because sometimes there are no machines. According to UNICEF and conflict data from ACLED, thousands of civilians across the region have now been killed or injured since the latest escalation began, including hundreds of children caught inside densely populated neighborhoods. The youngest confirmed victim reported by local medical officials was 4 years old. 4, not 14, not 24, 4 years old. These are not statistics. They are families, they are children, they are elderly people who cannot move quickly. In southern Israel, emergency crews also responded to rocket strikes launched from militant positions across the border. One of the youngest Israeli victims, identified in earlier attacks, was 12-year-old Eitan Zohar, killed when a rocket struck near his community. 2 sides, 2 tragedies. Neither side's families chose this war. In the northern Israeli town of Kiryat Shmona, residents described the chaos when warning sirens began screaming in the middle of the night. Yossi Cohen, a local shop owner, told BBC News, "We grabbed the children and ran to the shelter. You do not think, you just run." He said his youngest daughter was still holding her stuffed toy when they reached the concrete bunker. Across the border in Gaza, a teacher named Amina Hassan told Reuters that the apartment building where she lived had already been damaged in an earlier round of fighting years ago. They rebuilt it slowly, room by room, wall by wall. She said her family had just finished repairing the kitchen when the latest strike destroyed the building again. Everything gone, again. Let that sit for a moment, because wars are often explained through missiles, alliances, and strategy. But for the people underneath those missiles, the war is much simpler. It is the sound of sirens, the collapse of buildings, the moment when someone realizes the person they love is not getting up. That is the human cost behind the numbers reported every day, and it is still rising. Step back, look at the entire map, every development, every strike, every political signal. The patterns are clear, but the outcome is anything but. Either the United States and Israel intensify attacks on Iranian missile and drone infrastructure, in which case Tehran accelerates its proxy networks attacks across 4 fronts: Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. Cities burn, civilians die, oil flows disrupted, markets panic, or the US and Israel restrain themselves, in which case Iran consolidates gains, strengthens its missile capabilities, and solidifies its alliance with Russia and China. A regional imbalance becomes a global strategic nightmare. Neither answer ends this war. Militarily, Israel and the United States remain overwhelmingly superior on paper. Fighter jets, precision missiles, and interceptors dominate the skies. Missiles are intercepted, factories are destroyed, command centers decimated. But politically, the enemy's strength is invisible. Proxy networks remain operational. Ideology cannot be bombed. Networks of influence continue to function in crowded urban areas. And now, with Russia and China openly providing economic, diplomatic, and technical support, Iran's capacity to endure has multiplied. The war you thought you understood just changed. Strategically, this creates a gap between military victory and political reality. Every strike may set off retaliation in a different theater. Every target destroyed may trigger a new crisis hundreds of miles away. Add to that the economic dimension, oil prices surging past $94 per barrel, insurance premiums tripling, Hormuz's vulnerability, and the cost of inaction or miscalculation becomes unthinkable. The human factor cannot be ignored. Civilians under bombardment in Gaza, Israel, Iraq, and Syria will continue to bear the immediate cost. 4-year-olds, 12-year-olds, families who have already lost everything once. The cycle of destruction amplifies both local chaos and global pressure. Intelligence analysts warn the next 24 hours are critical. Signals from Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing suggest coordination may escalate. This could be the moment where a regional war becomes a proxy for the great power rivalry between the US, Russia, and China. The single most important unanswered question remains: will diplomacy intervene in time, or has the global alignment already sealed the next stage of escalation? In the burning streets of Gaza City, families huddle in basements as sirens scream overhead. In the command centers of Tel Aviv, officers track missile trajectories and drone alerts in real time. In a secure facility near Tehran, Iranian generals meet with Russian and Chinese advisors, deciding the next moves that could change the world map. The consequences are immediate. The families on both sides did not get to vote on this war. Neither did the 4-year-old children that UNICEF confirmed have been killed in the past few days. The streets, the bunkers, the diplomatic halls all echo with the same reality. This is a war with no simple solution. Every missile, every strike, every negotiation has global stakes. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Day 2 will bring new intelligence on Russia's missile transfers, further Chinese diplomatic maneuvers, and potentially a new wave of Iranian attacks on regional allies. This is the channel that puts every piece together and tells you what it actually means. Subscribe. Tell me in the comments, will Russia and China stop Iran, or will they push it further? And can the US contain this escalation without triggering a wider war? I will see you in the next update.